Hello, everyone. Welcome to this live stream. My name is Kat Huang. I'm a teaching artist here at Art Prof, and I'm joined today by fellow teaching artist Alex Rowe. Today, we are talking about how to find your art style. If you want to nerd out about art, Art Prof has everything you need, from tutorials to critiques to a community of fellow art nerds. So, Alex, when I was searching for my art style, when looking back on my artistic practice, I realized I've gone through periods in my life where I had a period where I was obsessed with manga and anime, so that's all I drew. I had a period where I was obsessed with Disney animation because when you're a child and you're growing up with Disney animation, you do draw in Disney style. But I think what sort of made me hop from period to period was this constant feeling of unsatisfaction or maybe unfulfillment of my style or maybe what I was doing in my drawings, et cetera, et cetera. But I was wondering for you in your artistic practice, if there was ever a point that you reached that you thought, oh, I have a style and I'm happy with it. And when was that point?
Yeah, I mean, first, I think my journey has been very similar to yours, like almost in a funny way where, yeah, like in high school, I did nothing but like, in hindsight, very, very bad manga comics with like my friends. And it was just like a bunch of vampire hunters and it was so bad. But yeah, like I, I think those periods of style where I was always drawn to make what I was a huge fan of at the time. And I think it's only after I kind of went through a couple of those periods that I was able to kind of discern my own style from that, if that makes sense.
Yeah, that does make sense. Like just as you mentioned, I think I found things that I enjoyed doing or I enjoyed consuming. And so I don't know, like osmosis, is that what you call it? I
Yeah.
would just sort of like adopt those styles and just have my way with it. But I think that something that really frustrated me while I was doing that was getting out of the rut of drawing in that style all the time because I wanted to be unique. Everyone wants to be unique. And when Disney is everywhere, you
Mhm.
just want to draw Disney all the time. So, what are ways do you think to get out of this style rut?
Yeah. Well, it's funny. We got a comment that kind of answers that question. Neil Espinoza said, I feel like I don't have a style. I'm happy exploring different ways of working, and I don't think I'll be settling on one type of style soon. So yeah, in a weird way, that perfectly answers that question. Where the best way to get out of the style rut, I think, is for me at least, was to kind of stop worrying about it. There
Mm-hmm.
was like a friend of mine, actually a TA of mine back in college, who, when I was so concerned about like what is my style, I feel like I have to find my style. Um, she just said, "Dude, style is just how you draw," and that just made it so much more relaxing to think about. Mhm.
Yeah, and that's
Yeah. How
true.
about you?
Well, I mean, I totally agree with your friend. I think when the more I drew, the realized that the way I was drawing was unique to me. Like there's just something different about the way I draw versus how my best friend draws versus how this professional artist draws. It's just going to be different naturally because you're a different person. But I think other things that did help me was just trying everything, everything and
Mhm.
anything. And that not only includes drawing style, but also mediums, like the things I was using to draw. I had a period where I was obsessed with figure painting, like oil painting, portrait painting.
Mhm.
And that gave me some like I was satisfied with it, but I still wanted to do more. I was still in that hunt. So then I was doing like pastel and then I did ink and then I settled in ink. So what about you, Alex? Did you try different mediums as well?
Yeah, like in a weird way, I feel like I clicked with like a style of medium before like a style of a visual style, if that makes
Mm.
sense. Because yeah, it was started off with like an ink and watercolor combo, and then gradually like kind of discovered wash and really clicked with it. Um, and it's been funny working with the same medium to then explore my style as well, and kind of going back to what my style was before and experimenting what drew me to it.
Mm.
Mhm.
Yeah. Well, I think also besides medium, I know we just talked about medium, but let's another thing I wanted to experiment was what I enjoyed doing with my style, with my art. Like I said, I did portrait painting for a while. So obviously I was using oil, I was rendering really realistically, and I was spending a lot of time on every single image. But with different mediums also comes different ways of working. And I found that although I could spend days, hours on a painting, I also wanted to try something quick, something that was more fulfilling, that was gestural and immediate. So
Mhm.
I guess I was also trying out, like, I went to an animation course in CalArts, and that really opened my eyes to different speeds of drawing. Like, we would do a figure drawing in 5 minutes versus 10 minutes versus 30 minutes. And through that, I think I found that I liked the one in between, the 10-minute one. And so I felt like my style also comes from the, I don't know, like things I feel natural doing, that I enjoy doing. But
Mhm.
I could only find that by trying different things, by trying different applications of my style, not just painting, but also drawing, stuff like that.
Yeah, there's a great point that Alyssa Mercado just made. That it's like it helps me to copy bits of different artists and involve those bits in my own thing. And for me, that's funny because I did that, but unaware of it. So Alyssa, like being aware of that is a very smart way to act because for me, like when I was in college, I was obsessed with like golden age illustrators. Then I kept trying to replicate Rockwell, Leyendecker, Mead Schaefer, and kept trying to be them. And I was doing very poorly at it. And in hindsight, that taught me so much of what I now know and taught me about my own style. But
Mm.
I do wish that I had that awareness in hindsight of like, this is just a learning period, you know? Yeah. Did you ever like, well, you mentioned like the manga and the Disney phases too, but like those periods when you're like, oh, this is definitely my style. And then a couple years later, you're like, never mind.
Right. I think it's interesting that you mentioned awareness, actually, because when I started stressing about my style, it was when I started becoming aware that I wanted to be an individual artist. And that scared me, but it was also really enlightening.
Mm.
I think before that, I was just doing whatever was I was enjoying at the moment. So if I liked manga, I was drawing like manga. If I liked a Disney film, I was drawing like a Disney film. Or there's this master artist, that's Rembrandt. I wanted to be Rembrandt. And I was sort of unaware when I was imitating these artists. I was like, they're cool and I want to be cool too. But then at a certain point, I thought, well, I want to be me and still be cool.
Yeah. Yeah, exactly. I felt the exact same way of like worshiping like my artist heroes to the point where in hindsight I wasn't really making my own work. I just wanted to kind of be like a student of like long past artists, which I mean, to be fair, is a really great way to learn. You study color, composition, form, technique, but I don't know. No, I think it did help me find my own style because I was drawn to it, but I had to get through that.
Yeah. I think it's good to have these inspirations. Definitely find what speaks to you, but use that as a jumping point rather than as a fixation. Because before me being aware that I wanted to be my own person, I was totally fixated on like Disney. I
Yeah.
wanted to be Walt Disney.
What It's funny, what really helped me through that, it was like a friend of mine who's also an illustration nerd, but not an artist. They just loved illustration. Was they recommended I look at like the artists that inspired the artists that I was obsessed with.
Oh.
Like, and that was such a cool, like in the case of Disney, like looking at, because these are so well documented, just the things of like the images that inspired the animators who made these films, and it's still super tight, like, and I think that kind of helped dehumanize or humanize it a little bit for me, where I was like, oh, okay, like Mead Schaefer really, really, really wanted to be this other guy first too.
Yeah. It's also, yeah, interesting to see the journeys of your heroes and not imitate, but just like learn from that. Just know that everyone's journey is a little bit different and you're your own individual person. You're going to like inevitably be different from this person and inevitably you will find your style. I also want to point out that style isn't Like people usually think style is a one-time thing. Like if you're an artist and you do portrait painting, that's all you're going to do the rest of your life. But no, style is really something that evolves your whole life. Like I'm still not satisfied with my style. And
Yeah.
I've gone through many periods. Yeah. Alex, are you satisfied with your style?
No. Like if I'm honest, I feel like every piece I make, I feel like I'm like, it's almost like, okay, I'm getting closer. Like it's almost like using a metal detector on a beach. It's funny, this comment 7 Angelica Enigma 7, so like it says it perfectly. I feel like if you keep learning and experimenting, your style will keep evolving over time. Won't? And yeah, like that's, I mean, my style, even when I kind of got out of the phase of emulating artists I liked, like I'd say every year, 2 years, there's like tweaks, shifts, and changes to my style,
Mhm.
which I don't know. Okay, do you have this problem where sometimes that can be frustrating? Like if I'm working on like a long-term project, like I like started up like a personal comic piece, and even in making it, my style changed, and it
Yeah.
was just so frustrating. Where it's like, wait, I gotta. Where it's like a cool learning moment, but it does kind of hinder the piece you're working on. Do you have that experience?
Absolutely. I haven't worked on anything long enough for that change to be visible, but it's very visible to me. I guess it's sort of all up in my head. But like I've been following some comics artists for years and years, and they still keep producing work in the same franchise. And it's so interesting to see them start out in a specific way and now they're drawing completely differently. And I guess while you're reading it, you don't realize that the change is happening slowly. But then if you read it all at once, like what I usually do, it's so apparent. And
Mm,
I just think, oh my gosh, I don't think I could handle that. I think I'd be too embarrassed, right? Like if I started out one way and then ended completely changing my style, basically.
oh yeah.
But
Like
yeah.
it's fun. Yeah, that makes me think one of my favorite like older comics is Tank Girl, and it's like, yeah, they chapter one is completely different stylistically from chapter two, which is completely different from chapter three. So it's it's like I think that we as artists are always going to notice those things more intently.
Right. And I think it's good to embrace that because I would be worried if you stayed the same and you were drawing a series for like 10 years. Wouldn't that be
Oh
worrying?
yeah,
Like, yeah, the style doesn't
yeah.
change.
I would get, I'd probably get very bored. But it's, it's funny because I think of, why I'm embarrassing myself forgetting his name, Mike something, who did the Hellboy comics,
Oh
and it's
man.
like his sketches are so beautiful, and yeah, they're same style for on 20 years, and
Great.
but they still seem to have a life to them.
Yeah.
So, Tim commented something good where it's, I used to overthink everything for a long time. It's a relief allowing for natural progression rather than trying to force change. It also
Mhm.
helped me to prevent burnout.
Mhm.
And yeah, for me, I feel definitely that where the style comes more freely when I'm not worried about it.
Right.
Like once I relax with some sketches and loosen up a little bit, it's a lot easier to get it to come. Yeah.
Yeah. I agree. I really like that comment because naturally, as you keep drawing, you're going to improve. And as you improve, your style will change. And that's a very good thing. And ultimately, I don't think it will ever end. Like, the more, hopefully, you keep learning, hopefully, you keep drawing and improving. And style isn't just one thing, it will keep evolving as you go on.
Yeah, there was a question popped up from Anya DC. Do you adjust your style based on feedback and what resonates with others? That's a really good one. Yeah, do you want to talk about that one first?
I think that's a really good question, too. I think it really depends on what kind of feedback and what kind of work I'm making. For instance, if it is a piece for a client, of course I'm going to change it a little bit for that person to be satisfied. But when it comes to my own personal pieces, if the feedback is valid and will make, I don't know, like my style clearer or have its make it so that the intent behind my story is delivered better, then yeah, I will go back and change things. I'm trying to think of an example of where that happened. I think like for a long time I was free-handing the panels of my comics,
Mhm.
and someone once mentioned like, "Man, they're so messy," and I was like, Like I didn't realize, okay, yeah, I'll be a little bit more careful.
It's like,
So
oh, people can see that. Yeah.
people are aware of that. Um, so I guess the panel style has changed the way I draw it. And I would count that as like my artistic style because panels, comics, drawings, they all form an image. And so,
Mhm.
yes, adjusting your style based on feedback, it's really dependent, but yeah, I do take it. What about you, Alex?
Yeah, it's the first thing I think of is like just being aware of like where the feedback's coming from.
Mm.
And like I don't know, some of the best things I learned about visual art came from a friend of mine who's like a writer and does poetry. And she was talking about how in writers groups there is a danger of very like prescriptive advice, where like an exaggerated example, if somebody wrote short stories that all turned into like action adventure and fantasy, and then they were critiquing like an emotional romance story, and if their critique advice said like, you should probably have like a car chase in there. Like that's not effective advice. That's just someone projecting their own style onto yours.
Mm-hmm.
So I would say, yeah, like check on that. And if somebody gives you advice that seems more like it's pushing your style in a different direction, like get that one behind you. But if someone's advice, like you were saying with the panel, seems to be genuinely based on how your work can improve and
Mm-hmm.
be the best at what it can be, I think that's the stuff to listen to.
Yeah. Be open to people's opinions, but take it with a grain of salt too.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah. I think something else that helped me with style was just literally trying, I think I mentioned this earlier, but just different things with art. So I dabbled in portraiture, I dabbled in animation, and I always felt this sense of being unsatisfied. And looking back on it, I think it was because what mattered to me most about art was my stories, were my stories. And so that's how I landed in comics. And I think my style has really changed to inform comics versus a style that informs animation versus a style that informs portraiture. And I think that's something that people should reflect on. Like, what is it that you want to do? And how can your style help you do the thing you love doing?
Hmm. There's there's a funny like tricky road based on that CCH5NG was commenting like, what if other people seem to like a style in my work which I don't really like? If I ignore that, is that being too close-minded? Because yeah, that advice you just said is so perfect of like, yeah, like focus on your goal and gear its style towards it. But what if you really want to be a portrait painter and everyone in the crit group is like, oh, you'd be so good at graphic novels. Like, what do you do with that? Like,
Yeah. Um, has that ever happened to you, Alex? Like, people wanted you to do something that really didn't come naturally to you, but you didn't want to do it, basically.
yeah, it's funny because it did, but it's honestly until like right now. But yeah, in hindsight, it took years for me to really grasp and understand it. Where it's like, I'm thinking of critiques that like I haven't thought about since like college, like good positive critiques of like, oh, you should do this, that, and the other thing that I brushed off at the time.
Mm-hmm.
Um, but now, like, I'm realizing they became useful directions for my work to go into.
Mm-hmm. Right.
Like, when I really wanted to emulate like golden age illustration, uh, the common critique I had was like, you need to loosen up because I was so rigid and tight with it.
Mm-hmm.
And now that I have loosened up years later, I can see how valuable that advice was.
Yeah. I agree. Like a lot of these comments, feedback, maybe it's not applicable until much later, but it's important to just keep an open mind. But
Hmm.
if someone is telling you to do something that you truly do not like doing, I think it will ultimately show up in your style. Like if you don't like doing something, it's not going to turn out that well in the first place. So you know
Yeah,
yourself best. Like if you feel like you're on a roll with something, that something's working for you, pursue it. And you don't always have to do what everyone tells you to.
yeah. It's cool to kind of see how the world will surprise you in that way too. Like, I don't know. I think of that animation group that did like that. They recently did the Van Gogh bio movie,
Oh yeah.
where every like shot was an oil painting, and it's like, this is an exaggerated example, but can you imagine someone like being a very skilled oil painter and saying like, oh, I'd never get into animation, and then poof, like that hybrid that you didn't expect works really well.
Great.
There's a really beautiful comment from W315 Bird. That's, I just worry that I have bad taste and my art heroes are bad. And I remember asking that in like my junior critique at school, where I was just like, it was just like a bad week. I got like several bad critiques left and right, and I was just like, do I just have bad taste? It's no, you just I think that on this you just have to like find your tribe, find the people that like your work, and you go with it. And then with that caveat of like, regardless of what direction you're going into, you do still need like the time and effort put into it to really develop it well.
Yeah.
Yeah, what do you think on that thought?
I agree. I think that if if people put you down for what you genuinely love, you might not be in the right crowd. You probably should find, as Alex described, like your tribe, like your group, the group of people that understand you. And ultimately, those people's opinions will be the most useful for you. Like they will matter the most. Like who cares what anyone else thinks if they really want to put you down? I don't think that you should associate with them anymore. Just find the people that you really relate with.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Just got a question from Alyssa Mercado that says, how important is it to be flexible to changing your style based on different clients' expectations or different jobs? Should I turn down work because it's outside my artistic range? That's a stellar question.
Yeah.
For me, I found a couple jobs where I did have to change, and it was a tough transition. From those experiences, I've learned if I have to change too drastically, I find it's just easier to not say no, but to recommend an artist that I know that I think they'd work well with. But minor changes sometimes just to get that money is, if I know I'll have to tweak my style for 2 weeks worth of work, then it's acceptable. Yeah. How do you feel about that?
Yeah, this is a super good question, Alyssa. And I am pretty much on the same boat as Alex. Like, if you need money, you got to change a little bit and satisfy the client. But if they're asking for something preposterous that you know that you can't do well, then I would just recommend another artist to do that. Like, I once had someone come up to me and ask if I could draw a certain subject matter or paint a certain subject matter for them. And I was very not comfortable with that. I felt like my not only is style like drawing style, but I guess also subject matter, like what I'm supposed to be, what I love drawing most. And for that client, I said, look, I don't feel comfortable doing this, but here's a list of these artists that can do this and do it very well. So you should probably ask them.
Yeah. And I mean, this is a quick quarter into like professional development corner of Art Prof. But yeah, like anytime you guys can do that, like of just like, this isn't really my style, this isn't my thing, don't like slam the door on the person and like block their email. Be like, oh, here's a couple artists that I know that you should check out. Because honestly, from doing that, the times I've done that, those people later come to me even years later saying, like asking for my style specifically.
Mhm.
So it's always good to stay positive with that.
Yeah. I think it's also heartening to know that no matter how you draw, there's going to be someone else out there that will want your stuff. So even though you think, oh, the way I draw is too niche, like I don't draw like Walt Disney, there's going to be someone out there who will be looking for exactly not Walt Disney.
Yeah.
They'll be looking for you. So you do you.
Yeah. And you just got to be kind of like flexible and open with it. Like, I don't know, like for me, my biggest surprise was like a lot of the gigs I got out of school was doing like local band and music posters, precisely because my style was not what was seen around, you know? Like they wanted something like that wasn't popular.
Right.
And lo and behold, my work was not popular. We got another question from Anya DC. That's, do y'all ever worried that you're being limited by your style? Can it feel too prescriptive? I sometimes feel that. I think when I feel that, it encourages me to kind of look at things from a different angle. Like if I almost view my style as like a tool set that I have. And if I'm trying to accomplish a task, I'm like, okay, so I can't go directly at it, but what if I kind of meander around this way?
Mhm.
That's, yeah. How do you feel about that? Almost the limitations that your style can impose on you.
Yeah, I actually do feel limited by my style a lot of times, especially since it can be a crutch. Like you think this style works, it's got a history of people approving it. I can do it, and so I'm going to keep doing that. And if anyone has checked out like my work and stuff, it's very it's like so clean and black and white. And that's a good thing. But I really wish it was like messier or I wish I could do more color. And so those are personal goals that I'm setting for myself. So whenever I look at my style and I think I'm unsatisfied or I'm limited, I think it's a good time to ask yourself, like, why do you feel limited and why do you feel unsatisfied? And I think for in my case personally, I feel a little bit constricted by how clean my drawings are they're always clean. And
Mhm.
so maybe I should just one day I should just go wild.
Just see what happens. Yeah.
Yeah, let it come to me.
Well, Lisa H might actually have a solution for, because I feel the same, but her solution might be for both of us. Of, do artists ever have two styles which they purposely switch between?
Oh.
Um, and I'm I feel so frustrated because I do know like illustrators historically who did either pulp sci-fi covers or like beautiful landscape. Robert McGinnis, yeah, Robert McGinnis, who did like phenomenal, beautiful like Connecticut landscape scenes, but then also like if y'all look up his work, then you'll recognize it instantly. He did like the paperback covers for like the classic James Bond books, you know, like super 70s, super tacky, cheesy. But yeah, that finding those two different breadths is hugely popular.
Yeah. I mean, if you can be a jack of all trades, like why not? If you can have two styles, go for it. And if you
Yeah.
think that you're able to balance it, like not everyone can, and that's also fine. But if you want to, yes, go ahead. Whereas if I actually like know anyone who does that, I'm sorry to say I don't know anyone modern. Like usually all of my artist friends, they usually stick with one style or either that or they do a variety of different things. But I've never seen two distinct styles. So that's actually a really good
Mm.
question. And I think I will keep my eyes peeled for that.
I I almost wonder if in like today with the internet, I wonder how many artists do that, but they're you just have two separate Instagram accounts, two separate names. Like it's almost spooky to think about. It seems like it would be easier to get away with.
Oh man. Yeah, it'd be
Oh,
super easy to get away with.
yeah, like how Taylor Swift and Kesha are the same person. um, Vicky had just asked, how can I tell if it's my own style if it just painted or copied from a reference picture? That's, I think that's the first thing for me of developing your style is to copy and emulate things.
Yeah.
And over time, I think you'll discover just how you draw it. Like again, what my friend the TA said of just style is just how you draw at the end of the day.
Mhm.
Yeah, what do you think about that? I like that confusion that Vicky is mentioning.
I agree with you, Alex, but I think there is a distinction between referencing something versus copying something versus tracing something. Because if
Mm,
you trace something, that's just a copy. Like you aren't making any decisions, any creative decisions on your own. But if you are seeing an object in real time and you're drawing it yourself, very naturally your style will bubble up. Like that's just the nature of an individual person doing an individual task.
yeah.
Um, but I think it's also different for an image being drawn in real time versus from a photo already. And by the way, our prof has several really good game show videos. Alex is in one of them or both of them. I don't quite remember. But basically, Clara Prof Lieu shows a bunch of drawings, and Alex has to guess which one is referenced from a photo versus which one is referenced from life. And usually, the more lively drawings, the ones with more style, are the ones from real life.
Mhm. And I think a way to get away with that too, excuse me, is to use like a minimum two reference photos for any one thing.
Mm.
Because I think if you're, say in an image, you're painting a scene with a train, if you use only one reference photo for that strain, like boom, you're painting that photo. But if you use two and you hold yourself to using both, then that's a way to create a hybrid through your art to almost guarantee that it is your work, not just a copy.
Yeah, I agree. That's actually really good advice. There is another tutorial on Art Prof, which is the digital painting course. I'm in it. And actually what Clara and I do in that video is we compile like a mosaic of different reference photos. And then we draw
Mm-hmm.
one thing based on that mosaic of reference photos. And so ultimately the drawing ends up being none of the photos, but something that we've created. So that is really good advice.
Yeah.
Lisa H. Sorry.
Ooh, yeah, no, you go.
I just wanted to show this comment by Lisa H, where she said, "I often draw in art museums with friends. Our versions always completely different. Our styles burn through." And I think that's super cool. Actually, draw with friends. You're gonna see how different you guys are from each other, and you're gonna also maybe like absorb things from each other or branch off from each other. I think another good way of finding style is just having community and people to bounce off of.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and that idea of going through the museum, like that, even the pieces that you all choose to draw from would show, like, if not your own personal style, your own personal taste, which I think can lead to style.
Right. I agree. Actually, there's a very funny story. I was once in France with one of my friends, and I really wanted to show her like the beautiful architecture of Notre Dame. And so I lead her to Notre Dame, and I'm like, let's sit here and let's draw. I'm so excited. And I'm drawing Notre Dame. And then I look over at my friend, and she's drawing the tourists that are surrounding Notre Dame. I was like, oh my gosh, why did I bring you to Notre Dame? We could have gone to any crowded area. And she's like, look, I just find the tourists so much more interesting. And I think that
Yeah,
was already so indicative of our styles.
that's such a good example. Yeah, because I'm thinking about it, and Notre Dame is beautiful, of course, but also so are Gladys and Phyllis on their first vacation from Minnesota. You know, they're beautiful as well.
Yeah. Really
There's
finding what you find interesting will also make your style.
Yeah, this might be the last question we have time for. Um, Seven Angelic Enigma 7 asks, do you think style is based on the visual look alone or the subject or both together? And I'm intrigued by that because for me, I think I'm at that point right now where my style variation is in um, the subject, where I either have like more whimsical, light children's booky work, or I have like spooky, strange David Lynchian work. like, but like the characters all look the same. It's just the story that's being told. Do you feel that with your work, where the style might be more the subject rather than the visual?
I do think they're hand in hand. I do think style is a visual and also a subject matter choice. Because look, if you draw a horror story versus a romance story, those are going to be very different art styles. Like one of the bucket list things I want to do is actually create a mini horror comic. And I already have in my head like I'm going to be drawing a little bit differently. I'm going to make it a little bit darker. It's going to be more hatch marks. It's going to be different. And so I do think that subject matter and visuals go hand in hand. But
Hmm.
I guess
I
that could also depend on the person you're talking to. Sorry.
That's funny because no, I just hear that and I'm like, oh, but like a horror comic with your style as is would be like weird vibration, but do you know what I mean? That visual difference would be almost very jarring, you know, in a
Yeah.
cool way. Like, yeah.
Yeah.
Mhm.
Oh my gosh. Okay. I'll talk to you later about this, Alex.
Yeah. So,
um,
y'all can talk to us about it on Discord.
yeah, that's true. And speaking of
Mhm.
which, our prof is now on Spotify and also on iTunes. We are a podcast. So basically, they are these live stream videos just without our beautiful faces, just our voices. And so if that's your cup of tea, then go ahead and check that out. Thank you, Franco. I wish I were the next Joe. And make sure to join us in the Discord. So we will be in the post live stream channel. We'll head there around 5 to 10 minutes after the stream ends. And be sure to subscribe to the Art Prof YouTube channel to be part of the Art Prof family. And last but not least, thank you to our top Patreon donors. Without you guys, our prof wouldn't be what it is today. So thank you very much. And also thank you to everyone in the comments for participating and watching this video. You guys really made it very interesting. You guys had some very good questions. So tune in next time for our next stream and stay safe. See you guys next time. Bye.
Yeah, thanks all.